Hello everyone. My name is Berta, and I'm going to be presenting my research, which is called Balancing Pressing Intensity and Defense and Solidity Against Different Passing Styles. And well, just take a moment to thank you everyone for having me here and listening to me throughout this presentation. I just hope you like it and you find it interesting. So let's get started. This is all the topics that I'm going to be talking about. You'll see that I will skip some slides because I just realized it's a bit too long, so sorry about that. But let me introduce myself. I'm Berta. I'm originally from Barcelona, where I studied my bachelor's in industrial engineering. And then I moved to Denmark to study my master's in business analytics, where I also had a stay in biotechnologies when I was working, which is a company that does this AI-powered sports camera. And after finishing my master's, I'm currently working as a data consultant based in Copenhagen as well, in the pharma and life science sector. And more in a personal way, you can see, well, I've played basketball my whole life, and a sports fan in general, but yeah, basketball is the main. Okay, so a bit of introduction of the topic that I'm going to be presenting. As you know, in football, selecting the strategy is going to be key for success. And making certain tactical decisions are going to make huge difference between winning and losing. But how do you really know if those decisions are actually working? So in this research, I'm trying to assess the technical staff to make informed decisions by answering some questions that might arise, such as, is it really worth it to press teams like Real Madrid, which have very skilled players and defenders? Or are we just wasting our energy without really affecting their game? So the focus then is to investigate the trade-off between employing high-intensity pressing and maintaining the defense solidity, particularly when you're facing teams with very skilled defenders. This has been done with last season of La Liga, and it's basically going to be divided into two approaches. First off, the clustering, which is going to be an assessment of the team's defender's ability with the ball, and we're going to group the teams in clusters with similar patterns. And the second part is going to be the study of the effect of the pressure on performance, in which we're going to also investigate if this effect varies between clusters, and also accounting for variables that might also influence in this effect. So starting in the clustering, as I said, we're going to try to group their teams based on their defenders' skills. The events that have been used are all the passes that were done in the defensive and the defensive field and the midfield, and all those the possessions have been filtered to have a controlled group of study in those that started with the goalkeeper. These are all the metrics that have been inserted in the clustering, which I'm going to go through in a little bit. And the method has been the k-means clustering. Here you can see the result of the clustering in a PCA visualization. And also you can link the colors to the list on the right, which is the final ranking of the La Liga last season. As you can see, for example, all the clusters are a bit distributed throughout the table. But for example, the green cluster is the one that has 3 out of the top teams, the final. Okay, so now let's go feature by feature, everything that has been included in this clustering. First off, in this plot, we can see success rate in the passes versus the amount of passes they did per game. Here we see a distinction in both green and purple clusters. They are the ones that have the defenders make the most passes throughout the game, and also with a higher success rate. We also counted the amount of times that the goalkeeper participates and passes during the game. We also see a clear distinction between the two clusters, yellow and purple on top, and then the other two from horizontal line down. And to account a little bit how do they perform under pressure, and here we can see the success rate under pressure on those passes that were done under pressure, and on the x-axis we see the amount of passes that were done under pressure. Here we can, for example, highlight Las Palmas, the one the dot on the right, that is apparently the team that has the most passes under pressure, so they receive more pressure than the rest. And for example, to highlight Real Madrid on top, the one that actually manages to make those passes under pressure with more success rate. And finally, we also accounted for the length and the width of those passes. In this case, it's worth highlighting that the yellow cluster, so one we saw that was on top of the classification, are the one more restrictive in the forward passing. That's why we see it more on the left side of the plot. While, for example, the yellow cluster is passing longer and further on forward. And yeah, here's a little bit a wrap-up of this information, but since I was just talking, I'm going to skip it a bit fast, if you don't mind. And now let's go to the study of the effect of pressure on goal opportunities and the study and see if this effect actually varies between clusters and their passing, the defender's passing style. In this setup, the events that were used were those possessions that started in the defensive field, but excluding the counterattacks. And then also we excluded all the events that happened after a red card. Some of the outcomes that have been studied are goal opportunities. As we measured, it was the time that the attackers managed to arrive to the opponent's area, the one that here highlighted in red. This was the way of measuring if they, a way of measuring if they were breaking the pressure. And two other outcomes that we studied are expected goals and the OBB. When it comes to pressure measurements, then we tried several, but in the end, in this presentation, I'm only going to talk about these two, which is the distance from the person with the ball to their nearest defenders, and also the overlap convex hull. So this is, as we see in the picture, you have to create a convex hull or a polygon with all the players in one team, and then measure the area that they're occupying from the opponents. Like, for example, in the first picture, we see that the black team, which are the defender team, are occupying more or less 80% of the area of the attackers, who are the blue area. So the higher this overlap, I'm taking it at the higher the pressure. And some control variables that we have put in the modeling are the relative difference between the teams in the final ranking, and some game conditions, such as the team is playing home or the attendance in the stadium. And finally, the clusters that we obtained from the previous part. Yeah, so in this part, then it's going to be an exploratory analysis on a possession level, meaning that we collected all these possessions that I talked before, and then we set a pressure threshold, that here, and then we split those possessions that were under pressure and those possessions that were not under pressure, and we compared these three metrics, the three outcomes that we see in this table. And in all the cases, we see that when there's no pressure applied, the outcomes are better, meaning that the teams in general are performing better when there's no pressure applied. And also with some statistic tests, we see that all the differences are significant. So let's see if these, let's do the same exercise, but now dividing by or stratifying by clusters. This we see the yellow column is without pressure and the blue column is under pressure. On the left, we have the OBB, and on the right, we have the goal opportunity rate. We see that pressure consistently reduces the performance across all clusters. There's no team that actually performs, that performs better with under pressure, but the magnitude of the effect varies. So since we didn't see anything important, we just decided to do the same exercise, but by team. And here we see some interesting things. Like, for example, Girona, which is the one that has the highest yellow column, is the one more affected by the pressure. Their goal opportunity rate drops drastically when they are under pressure. On the more on the left side, you see Barcelona, which is the one that has a way smaller difference, so meaning that they are better at maintaining goal-scoring opportunities when under pressure. And for example, it's also worth highlighting that Osasuna has a slightly better performance when under pressure. And now in the second part, it's going to be modeling. Before it was possession level, so now we aggregate everything per period. So we have all these metrics by game and then split it by period. And we're going to do two models, a linear model just to estimate the relationship between the pressure and the outcomes, and then a mixed linear model to see, to capture maybe some cluster level differences. In the linear regression, in this case, we have the expected goals as the outcomes, and we have these independent variables, so the clusters, all the pressure metrics that we used, as well as some interaction terms between clusters and the pressure. And basically, the key findings was the same general trend as before, that as pressure increases, the expected goals decrease. But also, most of the metrics were not statistically significant, meaning that their effect on the X goal were a bit, were not clear. But the difference in the ranking. So the difference between the attacker and the defender was statistically significant, meaning that team ranked higher than their opponents tend to generate more expected goals. And also, very worth mentioning that the R-squared was actually very low, so there might be other factors that we're not accounting for that explain this relationship. And also, to try and test the hypothesis that this effect varies by cluster, we tried a mixed linear model that is particularly suitable when your data change, or this effect changes by groups, by the random effect, which in this case we put the clusters, and we repeated the pressure metrics and the difference in the ranking. And the key findings were somehow similar. As pressure increases, the expected goals decrease. And also, there was a lack of significant random effect, meaning that actually this relationship did not vary between clusters. And again, we see that the opponent matters, was statistically significant in this model as well, meaning that, whoever you're playing against is going to affect your response to full field pressure. So, sorry, let me go first to limitations a little bit. Some of the limitations for this modeling was the cluster definition, like the metrics we decided to choose, as well as the number of clusters that we chose using the Hudl method, but still there's some degree of subjectivity. Also, how to quantify pressure. We decided several metrics, and the threshold was based on the quantiles and the range of values. So this is somewhat arbitrary in the end. Incompleteness of data, like the vision camera is affecting the convex hull and other types of metrics. And also, we didn't include the possession duration, which might have played a significant role in this analysis. So to wrap up a little bit the conclusions, we have consistently seen that the pressure is clear, that when pressure is applied, the teams seem to perform worse, but not by clusters. So it doesn't depend on the clusters that I found in this research. So either there's no way of generalizing the defenders in these clusters, or not like I have done. So maybe the next steps would be to analyze just by team, forget about the clusters idea, or try to cluster the defenders in some other way. And as we consistently saw that the ranking, the final position of the team in the ranking and who you're playing against, it matters. So for further research, this would be a thing to consider, to keep considering. But the models in the end were a bit disappointing. So we lacked important in the variables, and they didn't really capture variability or variance. So this probably means that the control variables and the assumptions that we made initially of the various variables to include in the regressions were not really correct, or not the indicated ones. So maybe we could try with other variables, such as individual playing attributes, or the duration of the possessions, or other tactical. And to continue with this research, maybe it would be a good idea to expand the scope for broader insights. So maybe with other seasons or other leagues, or maybe, for example, it would be just worth focusing just one team with having a lot more information and richer, and maybe put some more player-specific data. And yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for listening. And yeah, you're welcome to contact me and connect with me on LinkedIn, or just chat here. And yeah.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions at all? I'm just wondering if you, with that data, if you were able to also analyze like different formations, if formations had an effect on that, or time of the game.
And I didn't include the formations. I did analyze a little bit the numbers of formations, but I didn't trust them in a way because there were only 1 or 2 formations, and I don't think this is consistent along the game. So
Okay.
I went more possession by possession and measuring these distances and the pressure metrics.
Do you think that is a way to extend the data by looking into that?
Yeah, completely. Initially I wanted to include the formations, but in the end I think it didn't work, it didn't make sense, but I would definitely investigate by formation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course.